Yeah, and welcome to another video. And yes, scales do kind of suck for learning. I'm Brett Papa, and thank you for joining me today. Make sure you subscribe and click the bell to be notified when the newest videos come out. Now, why do I say scales suck for soloing? Well, let me be a little bit more specific. For melodic soloing and learning how to solo melodically, scales and just learning a new scale isn't gonna really show you how to do anything. You need to know how scales are constructed, right? That's a huge thing. Like what makes up the scale? What makes up a chord? Are the notes in your progression derived from a scale? And if so, how do those relate into making you be able to solo more melodically? Well, we could get into all that, and I do. I have courses, I have all this stuff where I do get into that, but a really quick, easy way to learn how to solo melodically requires no scale at all. What it does require is that you know two different chord shapes of the same chord. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this shape. Everyone knows this big, bar chord here. Think of this as an E-shaped chord, right? Your root's on the E. This part of it looks like an E minor chord, right? If I move to this major chord, it looks like a major. So anytime you see one of these big bar-shaped chords, it is known as an E-shaped chord, okay? Now, where you put this lets you know what the chord is called. Now, on these big chords, this lowest note is your root note, and it's a G. So a quick way to think about it is if you know the difference between the major and minor shapes, right? So this is a major shape, looks like an E major chord right here. And then your root's on the G, it's a G major chord. That's a quick street guide version of how and why. If I were to take this finger off, which makes the chord major or minor, now we have a G minor bar chord, okay? Now, right next to this shape, right? This minor shape, you have a root right here as well, right? So you have a root note here and the octave of the root is right here. Now, the cool thing about this is it lets you get into another shape of a chord. In this instance, it's a minor shape, but it looks like a D chord, right? If I just took these three notes, it looks very reminiscent of a D minor chord. And think about a D chord. It's got an open string, right? The root would be right here. If this was a fret, the 0 fret would be right here. So that's the D, right? String. It's open. It's our root note. So what I want to do is I would want to take this up to A, right? Got an A note here, and then I would place that chord right in here like it was a D chord, right? Same exact chord. Great thing is, no matter what, these two will always be tied at the hip. They are partners for life through thick and thin, heaven and hell. They will be next to each other forever, okay? So that's why I picked these two, because once you'll freak when you see how easy this applies to melodic soloing. So anytime you have this big shape, this big E-shaped chord right next to it, literally 2 frets up, is going to be the D shape, okay? Same thing here. Now we gotta modify it because it's a major chord, right? So I would look for my root right there, and then I would make a D major chord shape. It's a D shape, but it's a G chord, right? Okay, so I'm out of tune. Hold on 1 second. Okay, so we're back. So those are the 2 shapes. Now check this out. And this is why I say, let's learn how to solo around chord shapes instead of scale shapes, because then you automatically know which notes are legit. And then when you learn how to apply the scale in conjunction with that, then scales do not suck. But you gotta think about the chords first, right? So we got, always look at what's beneath your finger. If I'm gonna show you this shape, and I'm gonna relate it to a scale shape, this would be this minor chord right here. Underneath these big E-shaped minor chords, you're gonna have a shape that looks just like pentatonic position 1. Okay? No matter where it is in the progression, if there's 2 minor chords and you're using E shapes in the progression, that scale shape will actually work underneath your fingers all the time, okay? Now when I move to a major shape, think about pentatonic position 2, right? Anytime you see one of these big E major shaped chords, these big bar chords, think about a safe bet is always gonna be right here. Now, that in and of itself kind of goes back to, oh, I got a scale shape. I'm gonna just solo and no matter what I hit, it's gonna sound great. No, pay attention to the actual notes of the chord. So, although you have all these are the notes that really stick out. That's the notes of the chord themselves. So, when I started out and went, every lick I hit referenced a chord tone. 5th of the chord, root, 3rd, root. Now when I go down to this major chord, okay, so that's the 3rd of my G. The reason I hit this note, because it was part of that chord that I just hit, the A chord, right? The A minor chord. Right, so. But I'm really concentrating on this chord shape, right? And then when I went, right, that's part of my A chord too, but now I'm on a G, so I'm shifting the A note to a G note. And then I'm coming back to this A chord. Okay, so movement's good in solos, right? So I played this right here. Right? Okay, well now I have that D shape. So let's play with that. This is a super common lick, very used all the time. Or Stevie Ray. Right? The reason that sounds so cool, check it out. I hit every note of that chord. Yeah, I added this one because you'll see in a second my G's right here, the major shape. Okay? See how that all sounds great? Right? 3rd of my chord. Root note. 5th of the G. Okay? Now, the reason I say instead of learning a pentatonic scale, you wouldn't have gotten that note inside an A minor pentatonic scale, and it's a great note. It's actually one of the main notes in the G chord. It's the third. That's the one that makes it major or minor. It's a very big, powerful note. And if you just stuck to a scale, like a pentatonic scale, like we all learn in the beginning, you would have missed out on that note, okay? And so that's why when you start paying attention more to like chord shapes rather than scale shapes, you're gonna get that modal sound, but it doesn't matter what mode it is, right? It just like, oh, that's a note of the chord. It's gonna work. It's in my chord. How can it not work? And it's gonna sound good because it's coming from a chord as I'm playing over it. So what I'm doing is I'm bouncing back and forth between these two chord shapes, right? Got the E shape and the D shape, and I'm using those over these two chords. So let me give you a really nuts and bolts example of why this is cool, okay? So if I went here, right, I got, if we're just taking these strings. Okay, so that built a scale for me, right? Think about that, these two notes. Here's the third of my chord here, the third of my chord here. And then the roots. Right? It sounds freaking killer. And I'm just playing right out of the chords, but the chords in and of themselves are making a scale shape, but it's all chord tones. It's not like that guess of like, oh, is this note gonna work? And this is for developing your melodic sense, right? Scales are awesome. I use scales all the time. They're great for transitions. They're amazing, but it doesn't teach you how to solo melodically. This does. And then when you drop the scale over the top of these chord shapes, then it's like, well, the gates are wide open. You know, I mean, you can do anything, but you got to shift your thinking. I keep harping on this with everybody. Shift your thinking to chords first, scale second, right? The chord is what you really want to know all over the neck, not the scale, because then it doesn't even matter. If you can see chords all over, you're building scales anyways of all the cool notes. So when I moved up here, there's that A minor chord, remember? And then the G's below. So I know that my D shape is right here, right? Just like it was here, same thing, but with the D shape. Okay, so that gives me this note, and then so you can totally the cool thing about doing it out of those two shapes too is leading into another chord, right? You automatically know, even if I'm playing over an A, this note's cool because it actually is leading into the chord coming up, so it's kind of like setting you up for that note, right? So we got right there. I borrowed a note from that A chord, right? That A minor chord. And then if I added another chord, right? Same shape, I'll stick to an F major chord. hit another shape here. This is the A shape. But you can see as soon as you start learning multiple shapes of chords, all of a sudden, you really are building scales. You're just building scales out of chords, which is the way to think about it, right? If I can get anything across to you, other than don't pay attention to the fly that's flying around in here. See how your chords make up scales that you can play out of. And then just play real slow, right? Just real basic. Right, okay, I hit 2 chord tones, 5th and root. Now I'm gonna go to that G chord, right? And then, okay, that sounds cool. So right there, I hit a note of the G chord, A chord, and I can go back to the G. Right, that's part of a G2. So, when I told you you can play around the scale shape, then start to add that into it, right? So play around with just the notes of the chords and how they build, and don't think about these shapes. Don't use those. Do not, that's key, do not think about those in the first part of you practicing this. Just think about these shapes and where those notes are, right? And then you can start to utilize the actual pentatonic shape underneath these chord shapes. Right? There's the chord. Then start to incorporate the two together, right? So please try this out, because I swear, I started learning this about 8 years ago, and this is what really did it. I could play anything I wanted to technique-wise, but I still couldn't get a handle on, like, how do you freaking solo, you know, and have it sound melodic? And it wasn't until I worked with a bazillion amazing, ripping guitar players, interviewing them, asking them, how do you do it? Everyone said chords. Chords, nobody said scale. Nobody of any of the pros said scales or how I did it. They all said, well, I see my chords all over the neck. I would say scale shapes to them, and they're like, oh, is that what that scale shape is? I don't know. And it was like, scales were an afterthought. It was all chords. And then you see why, right? After editing terabytes of video of all these insane players, it's like, oh, it makes sense. Now I see exactly what they're doing. They're soloing from chord shapes, not scale shapes. So give that a try. I promise you 100% it will change the way you play guitar for the better. You guys are amazing. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, click the bell. Also, to support the channel and everything I do here, all the free videos are made possible by supporting something down at brettpapa.com, whether it is the all-new subscription site that's coming up, that's gonna have the Hendrix stuff and all the stuff, rhythm stuff you guys have all been waiting for. Subscription site's gonna launch here pretty quick. It's gonna be amazing. You get all the products, or there also is individual products that you can buy one at a time. You guys are amazing. Thank you for all of you out there who have supported the cause at brettpapa.com, and also all of you out there who have commented and liked the videos. That is awesome as well. We'll catch you next time.